This podcast is part of the Podcast Arcade Network.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Paranormal Dads. I'm your co-host, Eddie.
I'm Pat.
And I'm Andy.
Please join us as we go in search of the monsters, myths, and mysteries that surround us this week on Paranormal Dads. All right, we're back.
And better than ever, I might add.
Paranormal Dads.
Number 9.
Number 9, feeling fine.
You always come up with the great rhymes.
Well, that's a skill. It's a curse. Ask my kids. They hate it. So we're between holidays right now. We had Halloween.
We are technically in the holidays, aren't we, though?
Well, it's the
Doesn't
beginning.
it start Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. That's the holidays, right?
We're in the holiday season.
We are.
And I almost said thanks-a-ween.
Thanksgiving.
Halla thanks.
Holla, thanks, miss.
Thanksgiving.
Thanks-a-ween.
Eve.
We are back sitting down together, and we have some great new stuff to talk about and share with you. So strap on in as we discuss recent sightings.
All right, this week on recent sightings, it was my turn to select the topic, and I chose the Thylacine, also known as the Tasmanian tiger. You couldn't help yourself.
Sorry.
Not the Tasmanian devil, Eddie. It's the Tasmanian tiger.
Right. Sorry.
Now, it was a real creature. We're not talking mythical here. This was a real creature. There's video footage, grainy black and white footage from the early 1900s. This was a creature that lived in Australia and
New Zealand.
New
right?
Zealand?
Yeah.
I believe so.
And Tasmania.
Tasmania. Yeah.
Yeah.
Duh.
Sorry.
Well, just all over that area,
I
basically.
think in Iowa. Am I right, Pat? Am I right?
Down under.
Well, anyway, it kind of looks like a mix between a coyote or a wolf or what have you. The creature was actually a marsupial, and it kind of had...
everything there, though?
Yeah, everything's a marsupial. If it doesn't have a pouch, they don't let him in.
Yeah, exactly.
But
It's not a real big creature.
No. About the size of a coyote, I guess.
Yeah.
So not terribly big, about as big as your black lab at home.
Sure.
Or even smaller, I suppose. But it had stripes on its back haunches and kind of an elongated muzzle, and just a really, really cool looking creature. And they're thought to have gone extinct because it was thought that footage, the grainy black and white footage in the early 1900s, was the last known living creature. And of course, that one was in captivity. But since then, every now and again, Bob or Randy down the road claims to have spotted one either with his eyes or on a trail cam.
Yeah.
And it's all hearsay, but in recent months and in recent years, there's just been so many sightings that people are starting to wonder if these creatures survived and are actually making a comeback. So I found an article here from unexplainedmysteries.com posted on September 7th of this year. So just back in the fall, 3 researchers in Australia got some trail cam footage. Now, one of these contraptions that you kind of strap to a tree near a trail that animals are known to go through, and kind of digitally captures images when it detects movement. And so this footage is known as the Booth Richardson Tiger Team. So this is a trio of guys that are monitoring a remote area of bushland in southern Tasmania for evidence of the elusive Tasmanian tiger. They said that they were inspired to hunt for the creature after Greg Booth, who's a firewood cutter from the Tasmania's Central Highlands area. He encountered what he thought was a thylacine in April of 2015. And after monitoring the area for over 2 years using about 14 different trail cams. The three guys have come forward now in September with some footage of an unknown creature that was recorded at dusk on November 4th, 2016. So the video, which on this article you can watch a little YouTube video of it, it's gone viral, and the footage contains two potential sightings, one of something that's kind of close up to the camera, and then another that shows a four-legged animal walking around in the distance. Now, I watched it, and it is a little bit hard to tell what it is, but if you look closely, it almost does. It definitely looks dog-like, and if my eyes are not deceiving me, it looks like there's some stripes on the back haunches. So it makes you wonder. I mean,
backpedaling a little bit, is there a more manly job title than Tasmanian woodcutter? I don't know if there is.
if you don't have a beard, you can't do the job.
You're out, mate. Get out. I'm sorry.
Well, this creature was talked about on Destination Truth recently. He was down in, I think it was somewhere in Australia, and they were actually looking for what they believed to be some kind of a cryptid dinosaur creature. But they discussed this animal as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't there also like a traveling circus or some sort of like animal exhibit in Tasmania and Australia and those areas where they had one in captivity for a while and then it died? Like, I mean, this wasn't like something where not recently, I'm talking like 70 years ago or something like that.
And that may have been the one that they had the footage on, the last known footage of that creature. And it's kind of pathetic because... And you can probably find it on YouTube or other places, the last remaining footage of this creature. But it's kind of pathetic looking because it's really skinny and it's underfed, it's malnourished, and it's just kind of it's just pacing back and forth in a cage. Not maliciously. I mean, it looks pretty peaceful.
Right, but it's clearly not in its optimum environment. But
it makes you wonder, I mean, because they thought the creature was extinct, to my knowledge, it's not like there's any conservation laws of you can't hunt them or anything like that.
I think they're protected as a thing right now.
Are they, just in case they're still alive? I don't know.
I may be wrong, but I thought there was some sort of protection put on them in case they were found.
In case, yeah.
Like, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember reading or at least hearing of a thing where these may be extinct or they're pretty much assumed to be extinct, but in the event that they do find one, they're automatically kind of blanket protected as a species. So I think that you can't kill one even if you do see one.
But it still falls under, even though this is a creature that's been documented in the record books, it still falls under the umbrella of cryptozoology, which is the study of unknown, unidentified, or basically creatures that are that you don't expect to see. So it's still under that category of cryptozoology, and it really is interesting. I mean, I can't afford a ticket to go out there and look for myself, but you're kind of rooting for them. They're underdog, and I hope they make a comeback, and I hope they're protected. And I'm just waiting for someone to capture conclusive, definitive evidence of one.
According to the Parks and Wildlife Service in Tasmania, they were added to the protected animal list in 1936.
1936.
So
leave it to Pat. Pat's the fact guy, man.
Pat is nailing it down. I'm sitting here like, I think maybe.
Maybe I done heard that, perhaps.
Pat's like, this is fact. Billy Eddie.
What do you know what year they went extinct, or they were believed to be extinct?
I don't. It doesn't say in this particular article, but
here, the same year, 1936.
Yeah.
The last captive Thylacine died in Hobart Zoo.
Yeah.
In July of 36.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, and I don't like coming off this way because I am an optimist. It's one of those things that I think as you're an optimist and you're alive for a while, it starts to chip away maybe. Or not chip away. It takes on a little bit of a tarnish. But you're still an optimist even through it all. But it's one of those things that, like, someone asked me one time was, man, do you think if we found let's just pretend, let's just get kind of crazy. We found a unicorn. What would we do? Would people hunt that, do you think? I'm like, I think they would.
I think they would too.
Oh, yeah.
And this is kind of like underlying proof. I mean, here's an animal that like they're holding, and it's a horrible looking picture where they're holding the last one of its kind. And they're just snapping it off like a photo of it real quick before they go grab lunch.
Right.
And it's just one of those things
like it's a dime a dozen deer that someone shot in the wild.
Yeah, they're holding the last of something in their hands, and they don't even think twice about it.
Right.
And it's just one of those things that, like, you have such high hopes for humanity, and there's things that do keep you excited. But when you see things like this, when an animal is hunted down to the point to where it's not even a thing anymore, it just kind of makes you gives you pause. No pun intended. No pun intended. Pause. All right, pause.
I also think, what would people, and kind of going off the rails here, I also wonder what people would do if a UFO, landed in the middle of Times Square. People would be shooting at it.
Back to the Future.
You'd have people throwing beer cans at it from the rooftops.
Get him!
And then then the alien, Joe the alien's gonna look over at the guy next to him and say, "See, I told you this race was too primitive to land and experiment on. Let's get out of here."
I tell you.
When you look at a creature like Bigfoot, you've got one camp that wants to get video evidence of him, conclusive evidence of Bigfoot existing. And then you got the other camp that wants to kill one.
Right.
That's the only way we're going to be able to prove that he's real is if we kill one.
Right.
So, and they're always at odds to each other. And it's probably the same
debate. Yeah.
Same debate with this creature,
Well, it's good to know that they're protected. So even if they are making a comeback and people are seeing them more often, you can't go down to your local Bass Pro Shop in Tasmania and get yourself a license to shoot a thylacine.
Yeah.
That's good that we're getting our wits about us now. At this period in history. So if you listen to us and you're out in the area of New Zealand, Australia, or Tasmania, feel free to shoot us any opinions or better yet, some footage if you've captured some yourself. And cool animal. Hopefully it's making a comeback.
I agree.
It's time for pop, culture, and the paranormal.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about when I came up with the idea for pop culture and the paranormal.
Yes.
And when I thought of that, this is the thing that really motivated me.
This is what lives in your heart.
To bring it out, okay?
You crack open Pat's chest. There's not a heart there. There's a tiny little version of this right there.
And what that is Bionic Bigfoot.
Yes!
So people are saying, what is Bionic Bigfoot? Well, a lot of people, I'm sure, are well familiar with Bionic Bigfoot. Bionic Bigfoot was born in the 1970s, and he was on The $6 Million Man, Lee Majors, Steve Austin, The Bionic Man. Where he came across, how he became to be known as Bionic Bigfoot was in an episode called The Secret of Bigfoot. It was season 3, episode number 16 and 17. It was a two-parter. It was one of those stay tuned till next week, right? It was rough back then.
How did it end? Yeah.
You couldn't just binge watch. You had to wait an entire week
Yes.
before you get the rest of the story.
You gotta earn it, kids.
So what Bionic Bigfoot is, he's actually an alien cyborg that was created by a group of aliens visiting Earth. And he was constructed by the alien Shallon, who was played by Stephanie Powers, who I had a huge crush on. She wore like this kind of blue disco tight fitting suit. Oh, it was
like most
Like
aliens.
she'd be going to a rave or something?
oh, you're
Yeah.
right.
An alien discotheque.
and
I'm just...
You know what she probably brought to that alien rave?
Glow sticks?
glow sticks.
Yes! Oh my gosh, it's been too long.
You know what I'm trying not to laugh about though is so there's a certified hottie on the show and I'm thinking, man, probably still to this day Pat can't think of Bigfoot without getting aroused a little bit.
Thinking about Stephanie Powers. That's right. So Bionic Bigfoot was created to cultivate mystery and fear in a remote part of the Pacific Northwest in order to protect the location and identity of the alien secret base in this mountain up there in the Northwest.
Sneaky.
And well, what happens is Steve Austin and the OSI and some other scientists are doing experiments to try to, if I remember the story correctly, they're studying earthquakes and a potential earthquake that was about to happen.
Yeah.
And how they could stop this earthquake. Well, they were getting too close to the aliens, so the aliens sent out Bionic Bigfoot to shut down the operation. And, of course, one thing leads to another. Steve Austin and Bionic Bigfoot get into it. I think Steve rips Bionic Bigfoot's arm off.
That arm comes off. That's one of the most iconic scenes I
You start
remember.
beating him with it?
And there's
Exactly. They
there's
start eating
sparks, and Bigfoot just kind of picks up his arm and
Eats it like a cob of
he's,
corn.
he's screaming and he runs off, and Steve's like, "Whoa, that was weird." So
I thought I was the only bionic kid on the block.
by the way, Bionic Bigfoot played in that episode by
Andre the Giant.
Andre the Giant.
I love that man. God rest his
Well
soul.
known from the World Wrestling Federation, also Princess Bride, and a number of other movies.
Anybody want a peanut?
There were actually 2 different actors that played Bigfoot. In the first 2 episodes, or the 2-part episode, it was Andre the Giant. And then for the later installments, it was an actor named Ted Cassidy who appeared. And something we'll get to a little later, there was actually a toy or an action figure created of Bionic Bigfoot, and Ted Cassidy's likeness was used as the likeness on all the merchandising for that Bionic Bigfoot.
I'm glad you had the actor's
So a little
name.
bit of trivia.
That
trivia
is.
for you.
That's awesome. I'm glad you had that guy's name, the actor's name, because when you said played by, I'm like, ironically played by William Q. Bigfoot.
We know what's really interesting is there are some, there's a camp of the Bigfoot believers out there who do subscribe to the idea that maybe they're linked with extraterrestrials,
Right.
or that they're not flesh and blood mammals, but that they're actually like aliens they're aliens from a different planet who come down in spaceships, and a lot of the
Transdimensional beings.
transdimensional beings or whatnot, and some of them claim that that's why there's never any definitive evidence, because they can disappear at will, almost ghost-like. And then I think that drives the Bigfoot purists nuts, like the Finding Bigfoot cast. That they believe that these are just flesh and blood animals, that they're biological, that they're just out in nature, no ET, no ET strings attached. But anyway, just throwing that out there.
So you've got the first appearance in the $6 Million Man was the 2 episodes in season 3. Well, the next year he was such a popular. It was such a popular episode. They brought him back for the return of Bigfoot.
Oh, wow.
And so that was the season premiere of season 4 of the Bionic Man. And then not only was it a season premiere for the $6 Million Man, they tied it in with the Bionic Woman.
Oh.
And they brought Jamie Summers into the story. So this time you didn't have to wait a full week to see it. You watched the season premiere of the Bionic Man, or the $6 Million Man. I keep flip-flopping them.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
probably shouldn't. Purists are not going to be happy
Kill
with
you.
me.
You're fine.
So you see the return of Bigfoot on the $6 Million Man, and then it was immediately followed by the season premiere of the Bionic Woman.
Oh, and which
Part
picked up
2.
Oh, nice.
And that was basically the part, of course, Steve gets himself into trouble. Jamie has to go in and help him out.
Which is kind of what paranormal dads do. all the
So
time.
yeah, so that was the first 4 episodes, if you will, of Bionic Bigfoot, and later on, it was kind of like they almost had to jump the shark. It's like ratings were starting to tank a little bit. This is season 5, episode 5 of the $6 Million Man, and they brought Bigfoot back
Bring him back.
for an episode. In that episode, it was. I think they played it out as there were a couple of people out there hunting for Bigfoot, and Steve goes out and is trying to save his friend, who is Bigfoot, from these people who are trying to hunt him down. So that's kind of interesting. You get into the whole hunting Bigfoot thing. And
They became friends? Oh,
Yes, they absolutely become friends. In the first installment, or the first episode, the first storyline, they were friends by the end of it. And supposedly the aliens leave Earth or go back to where they came from. And then they come back, and it's almost like Bigfoot's memory had been erased, and they had to reestablish Bigfoot's knowledge of the $6 Million Man and kind of bring them back together. It's like, you remember I'm your friend. And they had a big fight, of course. And
And then they made up. I'm
then
sorry.
they made up later
Because
on.
Hallmark has a card. I'm sorry, Bigfoot.
I I love how formulaic stuff was, especially back then. It was like, Bigfoot, we're friends, remember? What is friend? You know what I mean?
But if he came from a different planet, like, does he come from the same planet that Chewbacca came from?
That'd be so good.
Planet full of Wookiees.
Planet Tusk or whatever. I can't
Kashyyyk.
Kashyyyk.
Yeah.
That's what planet Chewbacca's from?
That's,
that's where
Chewie's
he's
home
from.
planet. Don't
That
give me
is some
Kashyyyk.
Star Wars trivia right there.
Right here, up high. Woo! Star Wars high five. What I love, Bigfoot holds up a sandwich. Is this friend? Eats it. Like, no, it's not friend.
That's a ham and cheese sandwich, Bigfoot.
No, not friend. No. Are you
So,
friend? No.
But yeah, that was probably the most popular episode of the $6 Million Man were the Bigfoot episodes. And so, like I said, they came out with an action figure of Bigfoot.
He had the panel.
It was pretty cool. He had a panel that you could take your $6 Million Man action figure and have him punch his arm into a little button on the abdomen of Bigfoot, and his panel would like burst open, and you'd see the little electronic circuitry in his chest. But that's kind of wrong, because I don't think you ever saw the circuitry in his chest. It was
Right.
his arm that he ripped off.
That's this toy guy.
They have a pacemaker in there?
Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry, Bigfoot's on OS 10.
But back in the day, that figure retailed, it was like a 12-inch figure. It was a good-sized figure, but it retailed for like $7 or $8. Nowadays, you could buy one, if you could find one in a box, you'd be paying like $500 to $700
For
that thing.
Bigfoot.
For Bigfoot. Oh. So I saw that on the Toy Hunter one time. He found a Bionic Bigfoot, and he was all excited about it.
Yeah,
That's a
think
hefty
he's
price
found money.
tag.
But yeah, it is.
On a related note, guys, I was cruising down Q Street today.
Uh-oh.
We were going down to South Omaha to have some authentic Mexican food, and we are near like 40th and Q. And I see Bigfoot on the side of the road, like 7 foot tall, like metal kind of yard decoration kind of deal. And there was a for sale sign on it. And I was like, those things, like I've seen them selling at other places around town for like 175 or something. I was like, honey, I was telling my wife, I was like, I bet you we could talk that person down to like $50.
Yeah.
I mean, a life-size Bigfoot, I put it right in my backyard to scare off people walking on the trail.
For the trail?
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, hell, maybe we could chip in and go, each pay a third, and then we could rent it out, rotate
I think we
it.
need to do that.
Well,
Custody
there's
of
this person that sells that yard ornament type stuff off of Pacific Street.
Right,
that
120th
we
and
used to-
Pacific,
I
yeah.
wonder if that's the same person.
It was the
because
same type of
that
Bigfoot.
place is closed down. I haven't
Seasonal.
seen it. Oh,
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
every like spring and summer they're out there. But yeah,
Okay.
it's the exact same
But
one
yeah,
from there.
that would be so cool.
I say
to
we
have
chip
that
in.
in your yard.
And
Divided by
we can just
3.
rent it out.
Awesome.
Like I'll have it in the spring, and Pat can have it in the summer. Eddie has it in the fall, and then winter we'll just like randomly put it places around town like a John Doe and scare
It'd be
people.
so fun. Take fun pictures with it.
Yeah,
Like having Bigfoot.
Where's
out front.
Bigfoot? It'd be like a Where's Waldo kind of thing.
I'm down.
Yeah,
But kind of
my
tie up, put a big bow on Bionic Bigfoot. There was another toy introduced into the $6 Million Man line, where it was kind of like a racing set, where you had these air pumps and two little. They almost looked like motorbikes, but it was like Steve Austin and Bigfoot were sitting on recliners with wheels. It's kind of what they look like, and you would pump the air pump and push a button, and they go shooting across the floor. So Steve Austin had his red, white, and blue cycle he was riding on. Bigfoot's was bright yellow.
Of course it
Now,
was.
could you see Bigfoot racing through the forest on this bright yellow, motorbike thing, whatever it is? That would be so awesome. You'd be
Bigfoot
walking
like
through the.
yellow.
It's like, what's that noise? Then all of a sudden you see Bigfoot racing come blasting out of the bushes, pop a wheelie and take off.
Would he feel embarrassed, or would he just own it and be awesome, or would he be embarrassed and mortified like the bear in the circus that they forced to ride a tricycle?
Yeah.
Bigfoot rides stupid thing.
Bigfoot, his helmet doesn't fit, so it's like a little tiny helmet on his head. It's sitting on top of it, and he blasts through. He's like, Bigfoot born free! Ride or die.
Evil Knievel Bigfoot.
That is awesome.
So there you go.
The 70s
Bionic
were,
Bigfoot.
oh, I love it. The 70s were so alive with Bigfoot. Like fervor.
They were. I mean, there are a number of feature films in the theaters that you could go, and they were like documentary style films.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about sometime. But yeah, Bigfoot was a big deal back then.
And it even lingered into the 80s a little bit with Harry and Henderson's movie.
did.
You know, everyone's seen that. But yeah, Bigfoot, not only hopefully a part of the natural world, but it captured our hearts and minds through pop culture as well.
And now it's time for the main mystery.
Are you guys ready for this main mystery?
I was born ready.
Let's do it.
I've been preparing this main mystery for months.
You are a liar, sir. You sit on a throne of lies.
You smell like beef and cheese. This is, this may not have been prepared or crafted over months, but this is something that's been persistent in my brain for a very long time. I listened to a radio show, and I would bootleg it off of YouTube because it was like I didn't listen to radio at that time of night, and you had to like subscribe to it, like pay them money, and they would air the episodes on YouTube. But it was Coast to Coast with
Love that
Steve
show.
Norrie.
George Norrie.
George Norrie.
Yeah.
Sorry, George. And he listens.
He does. He's a big fan of ours.
He is. He's a sponsor. And so one of the things that they started talking about was these structures on the moon. And I was like, what? So I dialed in on this.
Probably a Starbucks.
Exactly. It's always. And so I dialed in on that as a thing, and it just kind of opened up this whole world of kind of tying into ancient aliens and ancient cultures that may have existed on planets within our solar system. So on this main mystery, we're going to discuss the moon and Mars as it relates to ancient aliens.
Yeah.
And ancient
I.e., civilizations that were intelligent and may have been there and left evidence in the past.
Right.
And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with the Ancient Alien show on History Channel, which is one of my personal faves.
Georgios, what is it, Tsoukalos?
Yeah, Georgios Salukadous.
Where every time his hair is more outrageous.
His hair is an ancient alien.
I
Yeah,
love
his
it.
hair, man, gets bigger each episode, and then they have to pan further and further out. He's like the Don King of the History Channel.
Exactly.
Just
It's so good.
crazy hair. It's awesome.
But
My daughter has hair that kind of looks like him some mornings with bedhead. It's awesome.
It's amazing.
We say, Giorgio, eat your Fruity Pebbles.
Not Giorgio.
I'm not Giorgio.
But so one of the to come back to the moon part, one of the stories, and I am going to butcher this a little bit. In fact, fact checker Pat may be able to kind of fire this up as I rap lyrically. But the story is that one of the astronauts who was on the moon, that narrows it down.
Yeah.
Did witness structures on the moon, and this gets into this whole moon
Conspiracy
theory
Yeah.
debate. I don't want to get into it too much, but did we really go on the moon, and is it a real thing, and all that? And we're all entitled to our opinions, but the bottom line is, we did
Yeah.
go to the moon. There's a guy who's actually the guy who I forget his name. He's the longest. He spent the most time in space. He just got back. He's
On the
been back-
International Space Station?
Yeah, he was over a year in space, and they're detailing out what his body is currently like going through being back on Earth, and it
Yeah.
is like a horror movie. Like his
that
body, his body is just all sorts of messed up.
Wow.
From being over a year of zero gravity. But anyway, so the story is on the moon that this particular astronaut, and I'm losing all this credibility, not knowing who it was,
It's fine.
but witnessed structures on the moon, and this is where. When they got there, the idea being that there's just certain things that we can't tell the public, so we're just going to kind of filter what they found and leave out things. But the idea being that it wasn't just like things that looked like, oh, that could be a rock formation of it. No, they're like, this is clearly a building.
Okay.
This is clearly, in fact, one of the accounts was that it looked almost like a castle. That was the description that they had.
So, in other words, not something that could be chalked up to just natural topography.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they were getting into the colors of what they were seeing of these structures.
So it's not just all a dingy gray?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. And they were describing like rainbow type color patterns and
Like the bridge to Thor's world.
almost
There
like
you
the
go.
Rainbow Bridge.
Wow.
And so they were getting into also like evidence of technology being on the moon before man got there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of those things that really, as you start researching some of this stuff, and that research is a strong word, but basically looking up things that kind of help either reinforce or challenge these ideas. And the thought that crept into my mind, and it's one of those things that like we here on Earth use this as a thing where we're like, okay, well here's science, here's evidence of a civilization that was here at some point in time, and it's a very valid question. What were to happen if you were to find evidence of a civilization on a planet where you thought that there weren't humans before?
We'd have to rewrite the history books.
Right. And it's a premise for a lot of good science fiction and a lot of other things, but there are people, and there is, people still say it's, that act of human beings kind of finding faces where there are none. But the idea being that there could be evidence of that even on Mars on some level, like evidence of pyramids and other types of, that era of civilization on these planets.
And people have been using tools like, there's actually a Google Moon where you can, they have mapped the surface of the moon, and they have been scouring through these images looking for things, especially like right angles and stuff that you would consider to be man-made.
Right.
So, but I could totally see there probably, is there a Google Mars? I don't know, but
I think there is, but it's all like it's as good as you're going to get.
I'm sure it's probably coming if isn't there already.
Yeah.
But looking for any indication that there could be something man-made on the moon, looking for shapes and, like you said, colors. That's then there are groups that take that thought and kind of run with it. I guess.
Yeah. And then you have one of the more famous cases. It's the face on Mars. It's just known as the face on Mars, and it's kind of I think it's a natural phenomenon. I think they've kind of debunked any notion that it was artificially created. But yeah, if you look at just the right angle, I mean, this thing is massive. It's like the size of a mall. But the shadows, and it kind of looks like an eye with a nose and a mouth, and kind of roughly the shape of an alien kind of face. And there's a name for that, seeing shapes and other things, like when you see a potato chip shaped like Abraham Lincoln, and you say, "Wow, it looks like something else."
That's the only chips I eat. By the way.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln shaped potato chips.
That's it.
But it is an interesting thing, and if you remain open-minded, I kind of shrug my shoulders, and I'm like, I'm willing to listen to anybody's theory on that, because our solar system, the universe itself, it's a pretty old place. So who's to say that in the ancient past, thousands, millions of years ago, maybe some intelligent race was on our moon or on Mars, or heck, even on Earth?
Our moon is interesting, especially as you start reading these articles, and this is where you have to bear a certain amount of this in mind. You're like, okay, listen, I am going down the rabbit hole. I need to keep a little bit of this. But some of the stuff, if you kind of put it off to the side and go, okay, I'm gonna consider this and think about it later. Some of these reports come through, like some of these astronauts have reported seeing vents and exhaust ports on the moon. Why would there be an vent and an exhaust port sticking out of the ground? Like a big like a sewer tunnel almost sticking out of the ground in a moon, and there's a theory out there, and it's so out there, but for me I shrug. I'm like, I can't prove it, or that the moon might actually be an artificial construct. Have you heard this, Andy?
Kind of like, what is that, the Death Star?
It's like a Death Star.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've heard that theory before.
Yeah.
And it's one of those you kind of have to put on the back burner and say, wow, that's really out there. But what if?
It's perfect. It's perfectly sized to block out the sun on an eclipse.
Yeah.
It's not, and despite they're different distances away from the Earth, but when those two line up, it's not like the moon's so small that it barely gets in front of the sun, and it's not so big that it completely covers. It just covers it up. And I know that sounds coincidental, like, well, that doesn't mean anything, but it's one of those things that's like, that is kind of weird.
Yeah,
like it's perfectly sized to cover up the sun. They were going into the composition of the moon is of the Earth. Like it's actually, and the actual real thing probably is that it was just pieces of Earth that were ejected when it was smashed with a meteor during all of that. And, as gravity and all that does what it does, it formed into the moon. But other thoughts are like, well, yeah, because they mined it off the Earth and shipped it up into the to make this moon.
One of these documentaries that I watched was talking about how they think the moon was formed, and kind of back when Earth was kind of like Play-Doh. It was malleable, and it was kind of like molten lava, basically. planet the size of Mars smashed into us, and all the debris flew into outer space, and gravity did its thing and kind of swirled around a circle in a whirlpool, and eventually kind of condensed and cooled into what we now have as the moon. But yeah, or it was built by aliens, and maybe it's hollow, and
or the giant experiment that is humanity needed the moon to stabilize the oceans, so the aliens built the moon to keep our oceans from killing us all.
We're just a science experiment.
We're living in an anthouse, man.
One thing that boggles my mind is how we went to the moon in the 60s, right? Mm-hmm. And then we created the space shuttle.
Yep.
And we have this space station that orbits the Earth, for years now. But we've never been back to the moon. That's always kind of like...
Yeah.
I assume it's cost prohibitive, but you would think we'd go back there at some point. I know the Chinese have been talking about they want to build a base on the moon,
There's a theory for that too, by the way.
What's that?
We were told not to go back.
That we were told not to go back?
That whatever we stumbled across...
Scared us so much.
There was that...
Don't go back there.
Or a direct interaction that was like, yeah, don't come back.
Well, I saw a movie where it was the dark side of the moon kind of deal, and they go over into the shadows, and then they get attacked by these spiders that are like the size of like a giant octopus, kraken kind of thing. I saw the movie.
It is weird that it doesn't revolve though, right? Like, why doesn't? I mean, there's obviously
the same side always faces us.
Always.
Yeah.
It doesn't revolve. It has no orbit. It has an orbit, but it doesn't have a revolution. It doesn't have a what's the word?
Rotation.
Thank you.
And it's like it's creepy if you think about it. It's like a guy who just keeps circling you and won't take his eyes off you.
I know.
It's like, why is that?
I just love Pink Floyd.
Dark Side of the Moon.
I'm more of the Wall guy. I like the Wall.
Oh, Dark Side of the Moon is so great.
It is good though too.
You turn the lights off and you start listening to that music. I was telling my son about this. Mm-hmm. They've got so much going on that album.
Oh yeah.
With the sound effects, and it's going not only just the sound effects, but it's your left ear, your right ear. It changes, and
You're talking about Dark Side of the Moon?
Yeah, Pink Floyd.
I think I read a little fun fact on one of these little fun fact books that album, like one of the songs on that album was on the top 10 list and on like radio rotations for like 59 weeks or something. It was insane. It was like more than a year that it was like number one.
But I'm sorry.
No,
where are we even at? Moon? Okay, Moon.
Never apologize for Pink Floyd interlude. So there's the moon and Mars for me personally just captures my interest. There is a theory, and this kind of does tie to ancient alien theory. There's this fascination in ancient cultures with the sky and particular planets. And one of the fan theories or even active theories out there is that there may be, this whole panspermia thing. Yeah. Obviously, it probably has some legitimacy to it. Where like cells from another place landed here, and that's where maybe Earth on life.
Yeah, transpermia. It's basically like a bacteria or some sort of organic life hitching a ride on like an asteroid or meteor, crashes into a different planet, and then that bacteria it seeds the planet and then grows into an quote unquote intelligent beings like us.
Right, exactly. who shoot at aliens.
Right.
But this other thing is a little bit of an expansion on that, where the thought is that there may have been a culture of humans living on Mars back when Mars was habitable, before it was what it is now, before it was this irradiated death ball.
Right.
Mars maybe at some point had been more... There's evidence that there was water on Mars and that it had a breathable atmosphere. And so the thought being that there may have been at some point in time a human culture on Mars that had on some level a degree of primitive space travel and saw a disaster coming, whether it was brought on by themselves or just natural occurrences, and we're like, we got to get out of here. Earth is the nearest planet, very Battlestar Galactica-ish.
Yeah.
We got to get out of here before Mars becomes uninhabitable. So they literally bounce, and they can't send everybody, so they send, almost like an Adam and Eve kind of thing.
Yeah.
Send off a small colony to Earth. Hey, that is a thing. That's an actual thing. And I mean, on some level, it'd be weird, but for me, it does excite my imagination. Where
it kind of makes sense if you
really
think about
happened?
it. And wouldn't it be really weird if sometime in the distant future, if we could, what's it called, terraform Mars?
Yeah.
In other words, make it green again and adjust the atmosphere and ecosystem, even if it's like artificially in like domes or whatnot.
Right.
And then when our planet's right on the brink of extinction, going back to Mars, it's just pinballing back and forth every couple
Mars,
million
Earth,
years.
Mars,
Live
Earth,
on Mars
Earth.
till our planet gets fixed, and then, like you say, ping-ponging back and
Ping
forth.
pong and
It's like rental property.
Like I don't know anything about farming, but I've heard like they'll take turns, like they'll farm on this piece of land one year, and then on this piece of land another year, and they kind of alternate back and forth to give it a chance to get fertile again.
Yeah.
So kind of like that, but it's a good theory, and yeah, you're right, Eddie. They've virtually proven, pretty much beyond a shadow of a doubt, that at one point in time, Mars was lush and green, had breathable air. And it just, what they call it is a runaway greenhouse effect, where there was too much carbon dioxide in the air, and then it became hot and it became sterile, and it basically, once you melt away that outer atmosphere that shields the sun rays, it just cooks your planet.
Yeah.
Sadly, that's what's happening to Earth right now, very slowly, but with global warming and everything, and our CO2 emissions from vehicles and whatnot, that we could be living on a planet very much like Mars, in a few million years down the road.
This is where it comes off very like Mad Maxy.
Yeah.
And very like
Mad Maxy.
Thunderdome.
But it's one of those things that, like, if you look at ancient stories and cultures and you kind of apply what we understand like stuff to be, and it becomes more and more obvious. And this is a great bit by Joe Rogan and he got it from a Terence McKenna talk, where it was like, if you take humans right now, like you, me, and Pat cannot build a cell phone.
No.
Like right now, we
Right.
can't. We don't know how. We don't know how. We don't have the materials. So if you remove our ability to kind of keep like leapfrogging off of the next biggest thing, if there's an event, like let's just say
If we had to start from scratch again.
the best you're going to get is cowboy days.
That's it.
That's the best you got.
You're
you
right.
don't have antibiotics. You don't have. So the best we have is frontier times. And even then, it's going to get more and more harsh and more brutal, and resources are going to become more and more thin. And in this, and I'm stealing this from Joe Rogan, but I'm giving him credit. He goes, what happens is, there's a giant cataclysm, and you try to defend your house as long as you can, but your house is crumbling apart because it's made of cheap stuff. It doesn't last a long time. So then basically you end up leaving the house, and you can't carry all your stuff with you, so you only bring the essentials. And so then your clothes get ripped and torn. Over time, your language gets more and more simple because you can't waste time expanding giant thoughts. You got to go. It's a crazy environment. You go to these caves so you can stay alive because the caves are hewn from rock.
I see where this is going.
And they last forever. And before you know it, you've got long hair and you have a spear and you're just pointing it at things and grunting because that's all you can do. And all you can do is tell stories of how this land before, this giant, you had cars and planes and things flew in the air, and it all gets chalked up as myth. And then over time, the civilization reboots itself, and they look back at that guy with a spear, and they're like, that's where we came from, not even realizing that. So the idea being that humanity does this, it's not a constant trajectory. It has a series of peaks and valleys.
It's a cycle.
And so that's...
I have a feeling we're headed towards a valley. God. The glory days.
But that's my thing,
Yeah.
is ancient cultures, when you ask a lot of them, where did you come from, or where did you come from, they point to the sky.
Sky people.
And at one point, it's like, well, that's because they were primitive and stupid. Or is it because maybe we came from the sky?
Yeah.
And that's all,
There's and some people might scoff at the ancient alien theory. There's too much evidence out there that lends credibility to it. There's paintings, paintings of like biblical time type of things where there's things in the sky that's not a star, not a bird. They didn't have aircraft, and it looks like a dang UFO. Mm-hmm. There's other stories from the as recent as the 1600s in Germany. I think it was Nuremberg, but it's somewhere in Germany where people documented, and hundreds and thousands of people witnessed these aerial battles between ships that flew in the sky and shot laser beams at each other, and they were glowing and they were on fire and they were flying around faster than they could even describe.
Yeah.
You got things like this going on. It just makes you wonder, man. I mean, it really does. So.
It just gets the hubris of our modern mindset of like, well, we know much more than than they did, so it doesn't matter. And then you get into a thing where, I don't know, maybe they were telling the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe Bigfoot is an android.
Good old Bigfoot with an artificial heart.
What's crazy is you zoom in on a Bionic Bigfoot's heart and it's Pat. What? But yeah, hey, so out there, what are your thoughts on the moon and Mars? I mean, do they fascinate you? Are they just boring hunks of rock? Is the moon hollow, full of guys throwing levers? Is there a guy asking for a handrail so he doesn't fall off and the laser comes out? Oh, I want a handrail right here. What's going on?
The moon's made of cheese.
It's made of cheese.
I forgot the cheese theory.
Well, and then you have the flat earthers who...
Thank
and
you.
he just groans
We
every
almost
time.
forgot. It's
Flat
funny,
earthers.
My wife was just telling me this story before I came over here tonight. So
I mentioned
you
the
guys probably know it better than I do.
I mentioned the moon might have been being a construct, and yet I'm laughing at flat Earth theory.
There are people out there who believe that the Earth is flat and that every photograph and video and astronaut who claims otherwise, it's just they're just bogus and it's a conspiracy theory.
Even if you threw away everything that's scientific about the flat Earth theory, and we're just like, okay, the amount of lying that would have to happen on just normal people, like just a pilot, just a guy that flies around. I mean, I work in the land of long distance measurement and surveying. Like, we have to accommodate for the curvature of the Earth.
Right.
And it's not just, well, you know, because their other side is, well, it's not actually flat like a pizza. It's more like the top of an egg. It's got a little bit of a curve. No, because we have to factor in an entire entire sphere. It's not just we're figuring for part of it. Actually, when you factor in a measurement of 10 miles, you got to take into account the circumference of the Earth. So it's like people who do that don't really take into account things like surveying and long distance mapping and
the level of denial that a person would have to put themselves through to truly, genuinely believe that the Earth is flat and that everybody else who believes otherwise is lying or delusional. It just boggles my mind. But what recently kind of made the news, and did you have the article pulled up, Pat?
Yeah.
It's a recent article of this guy, the Washington Post. Let's see. California man plans to launch himself 1,800 feet high Saturday in a homemade scrap metal rocket in an effort to prove that the Earth is flat. He's postponing the experiment after he couldn't get permission from the federal agency to conduct it on public land. So anyway, the launch is going to take place sometimes next week on private property in some unincorporated community along Route 66. And the guy says, quote, "It's still happening. We just moved it 3 miles down the road." And he says this is what happens anytime you have to deal with any kind of government agency. And this guy also has been quoted as saying, "I don't believe in science."
I love his thing. This is what happens when you have to deal with any governmental agency. They just won't let you blast off a giant steam-powered rocket that weighs as much as a semi over populated areas. Jerks. I mean,
the article goes on to say, assuming the 500 mile per hour, mile-long flight through the Mojave Desert does not kill him, Hughes told the Associated Press that his journey into the Atmos flat. Oh, that's what they call the atmosphere? It's the Atmos flat, not the atmosphere.
It's not round. It's not a sphere.
He says it'll mark the first phase of his ambitious flat Earth space program. Good luck to you, Mr. Hughes.
But if you look at this guy, my wife is telling me the story, and she's talking about steam-powered rockets, and you look at the picture of this guy. This is Evel Knievel's rocket. If you remember back in the 70s, he tried to jump Snake River Canyon in a steam-powered rocket. He ended up basically going straight down into the canyon. Luckily, he had a parachute.
Wile E. Coyote style.
Later, just recently, past year or so, his son attempted the same stunt, and he actually made it. But
is that Robbie Knievel?
Yeah. But he tends to put a little more science, a little more thought behind his stunts.
Measure twice, cut once kind
exactly.
of approach. Yeah.
Evil, he's just like, let's do it.
More
let's
dynamite.
Go for it.
More dynamite, go speed.
But that's exactly what this guy reminded me of. His launch mechanism is actually a Winnebago.
Yeah.
and he's got some, a launch pad built over the Winnebago, and
It's all welded on, all rickety looking.
It's just
But he's excited about it. He says, quote, "I'm really behind the 8 ball on this one."
I really got to go. My investors are going to kill me. I got to get up there. Old Roy Dog Food's not going to be happy if I don't get this up in the air.
Gosh, and we can joke now. We won't be joking in a week because I'm
Yeah.
genuinely afraid this guy will not be alive anymore.
I watched his test video. He did a test flight. Did you watch this?
No.
He has a test flight video on YouTube. I invite anybody to watch this. And like Andy had said, it's a steam-powered rocket. This baby, he's a steampunk flat earther. and he's got his goggles on. He's got his like clockwork like watch. His mustache waxes out. And I watched this rocket take off. So I'm used to seeing like, NASA rocket, like real rockets, which look like, they're gigantic controlled explosions. And this looks like somebody's like iron got left on and it just like shot off into space. Mist comes flying out. It's one of those like old, not old timey, but the rockets that we had as kids that you pump up with air and then you pull the lever and it pops off. That's what it looked like, which is what it is. It's just pressured water, right?
Right.
And so it goes off and this thing tears off like, doesn't believe in science. Yeah, he went from 0 to whatever this top speed was in no time. And he isn't like strapped in or whatever. This thing takes off and it's done from his perspective. He has like a GoPro strapped to his head, so you can't see him. You just see what he sees.
Right.
And it looks like the most vicious car accident you've ever seen. It shoots off. You get he's in the air because he's doing this like a football thing. His rocket's doing the football pass where it's just spiraling. And then it plows into the dirt. And it doesn't like skid to a stop. It like just goes boom and just stops. I'm like, he's dead. Like it liquefied his organs. And then the article attached to it was like, this was his test flight, and it took him 3 days to recover from the test flight. Just the physical stresses of all that. I'm like, this he's gonna turn himself into a snack pack.
So what's his plan? Is his whole thought to get up there in the air to prove that it's flat?
He can't get high enough.
Yeah,
He wants to get up high enough to prove that there's no curvature of the
He's
earth.
going to take a picture of it and prove that there is no curvature to the horizon.
He's going to get 10 feet off the ground and he's not going to see a curve. See, I told you so.
The flat earthers, I mean, even for them as crazy as they are, they believe that it's huge still. Like long enough, big enough certainly for China to exist on the same horizontal plane as us. So that's far away. So he's never going to see that if he has to get up in space
right.
to see. He's not going to get in space. What if he did? That weird. Did you guys see that guy that did the world's largest skydive? He did it from the threshold of space.
That was
that was
BA,
crazy.
dude. That was awesome.
I was like, he passed out halfway down. Anyway, he would have to get like above that, which gravity would cease to work on him at that point. He'd be like, oh no.
Then he'll turn into a popsicle and say, oops, should have brought a spacesuit.
Exactly. I don't believe in science. It doesn't work on me. Oh man. It's just his nickname is Mad Mike Hughes, by the way.
Mad Mike Hughes?
Mad Mike
That's
Hughes.
appropriate.
Well, good luck, Mad Mike Hughes.
Oh man.
I hope you make it.
I hope you make it, buddy.
Whether the earth is flat or not, it's not going to make much difference because he's going to be.
Oh, God.
Sorry.
Oh.
That's your happy thought.
Well, on that note, yeah.
Hey, well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Paranormal Dads. First of all, be sure to download us on iTunes, Podbean, or Stitcher Radio.
We're on Facebook at Paranormal Dads and also on Twitter at Paranormal Dads. Website's paranormaldads.com.
And along with this episode in the show notes, we'll go ahead and put some links and pictures to some of the articles that we were referencing during the show. So thanks for staying with us as we totally went off the rails there, as we sometimes do. And thanks for listening. We appreciate your support.
The sound effects brought to you by freesounds.org.
Peace out, people.